Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and go over how to make a scoreboard feature in Scratch. So everyone is going to need this for their video project. And we're going to start by filling out this the new feature template, right? That's something that is for each of our homework assignments to do. So this feature is going to be our scoreboard. The scoreboard will allow us to keep track of an individual's player, an individual player's score, and also keep track of their final score. So it's gonna keep track of their final score with respect to other players also playing. Okay. So where does this feature go in Scratch? This is going to be in the background because this doesn't belong to a player sprite or an enemy sprite or any type of object. It's kind of a background feature that's always going on in our game. And so features like that are always kind of there oftentimes go into the background. So it's going to go into the starting background. So it'll go in the starting background. And there's also potentially going to be, it might also go in the ending background when we display the scoreboard. So in also the ending background. And this is the most important part that you need for this question. You need to specify, is it a background or a sprite, and then which background it is. So you could just write starting background and ending background. You don't even need a complete sentence. All right, so what does your feature do? Again, there's all five, okay. And we're going to list the logic steps of your feature. These should directly correspond to what you need your program to do. Each list item should guide you when determining which Scratch puzzle pieces to use. So we're going to break this down into the steps that needs to happen. And this is oftentimes the hardest part about programming, is just breaking it down here. It's not even doing the actual programming, it's just thinking, how do we break this down into its steps? So let's think about the goal that we need to accomplish. We need to keep track of score. So in order to do that, what do we need to know? Well, we need to know who is playing, because the score needs to keep track of a certain player. And then we also need to keep track of the number. So the steps that we're going to create here is we first need to figure out who is playing. Then we need to create a score for them. The third step is they're starting to play the game. So we need to keep track of score throughout the game. And then something is going to happen to where the game ends. So the game ends and the player sees their final score. So we want to show the player their final score. And then the last thing that we need to do is display the scoreboard with everybody's score. And so we're going to need to do some math to see where their score falls into play. So display the player's score on the scoreboard. And maybe this ending background, maybe we call it the scoreboard background. So you might want a different ending background, like a splash art ending background. And this scoreboard will be kind of like after the game is over, you just display their score. So this is our feature document, and now we're going to go ahead and start programming in Scratch. Okay, that was just me checking to make sure that everything was recording well. Okay, so this right here, boom, a lot of you guys are getting the feature done, pretty easy to fill out. But then you say, okay, now I need to program it in Scratch. And this is where a lot of the time like, oh, where do I start? What do I do? So this is where we go back to our feature, and this is going to help us. So where do we start? We're going to start with the starting background. This is where we're programming it, okay? So I'm going to go to backdrops on the stage, go to backdrops, and I'm going to name this one. I'm going to rename it my start. We'll just call it start. And this is going to be our starting backdrop, okay? And let's just go ahead and make it purple. Why not? Maybe. If that'll, here we go, the paint bucket. Why not? Why is it transparent? There we go. There's our purple background. So this is just going to help us know that it's starting. And maybe we can even go ahead and type in start there. And we want that to be a different color. So, boom, there we go. All right, so this is our simple starting background. And now we switch to code. We have the backdrop selected, and we know that we want to code here. We already decided we wanted to code in the starting background, so that's where we're going to code. So let's go look at our feature steps and think about what we need to do. All right, so figure out who is playing. So to do that, another way to write this would be we need a user input from the player, which is going to be their name. Okay, so that's how we're going to figure out who is playing. Now on your guys' homework, you don't need to necessarily include this here. You just need the 5 steps. But this is what this step is helping us do. Figure out who is playing. We need them to type in their name, which is another way to say that. So to do that, we're going to go to variables, and we're going to create a variable. And this variable is going to be called player name. So this is going to be a spot where the player can type in their name. And let's see, is that in? We should be able. All right, so we need this is an operator. Sensing. Ask what's your name and wait. There we go. Okay, so this one, the puzzle piece is here. So if we go through all the puzzle pieces, we could say ask what's your name and wait. That describes exactly what we want to do. We want to figure out who is playing. And so sometimes the hardest part about Scratch is just finding the puzzle piece that you need. But we're going to want to figure out, we're going to ask what's your name and wait. And then this answer here is going to be the answer that they type in. You see how there's this kind of like bullet point here? That this means that the answer is whatever they type in. So whenever we start programming, we always need an event, and we're always going to kick off our game with when the green flag is pressed. So the first thing we're going to do when we start is click the green flag, and we're going to ask, what's your name and wait. And if we click the green flag, we now get this prompt here. It says, what's your name? And I can type in my name. And then it's waiting for the player to hit the green check. And now it's done. But that's not good. We need it to do some other stuff, right? So we need our program to remember the person's name. So this variable player name that we created, we're going to set, so we don't need to drag out player name. Actually, we need to set the player name to the answer that they typed in. So to the answer. So watch this. I hit the green flag. I type in my name. And now watch player name up here. It now says Kyle, right? So it's going to change the player name to Kyle. And this is going to let our program keep track of the player name throughout the whole entire time. So we set player name to Kyle. Cool. Let's go back to our feature, figure out who is playing. Boom, done. With 3 lines of code, we did that. The hardest part was literally just finding the right puzzle piece. And that's where you guys just play around a little bit on your own and try to find puzzle pieces that do the things that you might want to do. And just play around with them and see what they do. All right, so now we need to create a score for the player. So score is going to be another variable. And this is going to be a number to keep track of. So remember our different variable types. We have numbers, booleans, and words. So the player name is a word variable type, and the score is a number variable type. So we'll go down to variables, make a variable, and we'll say player score. And say OK. So now they have a score. And whenever we click the green flag, we can just continue off here, right? This is the start of our program still, the start of our game. So we click the green flag, we enter in the name, and now we need to set the score to 0. So we always just start setting the variables at the beginning. And this is signaling that the game is starting over, so the score needs to start at 0. We always want to make sure that we don't have dangling puzzle pieces. So we're going to put a stop this script at the end. But that doesn't mean we can't add things in here later. If we ever want to do more beginning of the game setup, we put it here. And part of the setup is asking questions and literally setting variables. So set is part of setup. So we'll put that there. Now the player score is 0. And boom, we did step 2. Create a score for them. We have that. It's right here, the player score. So it's set up. So now we need to keep track of the score throughout our game. So somewhere in our game, something is going to trigger the score. So something is going to trigger the score. And what we're going to need to do is add or subtract the score, okay? Add or subtract the score. So now, this part of the code might not go in the background. So this part, we actually might realize that the score increase or decrease might be in the player sprite. And it's okay. So we figured this out. We filled out our feature already, and then we realized that there's another location, but that's okay because we didn't need this at the beginning because this was something to get us started. So the hardest part about coding is just starting to do something. And so by getting it started, we got to step 3. We got here. This was a lot of progress for us already. And now it's helping us know that, okay, we didn't think about everything at the beginning, and that's okay. And now we need something to be in the player. So let's say I'm going to go to the player sprite, and let's say I'm going to go ahead and name it to the player. Yeah, just a player. Okay, that way we know it's the player sprite. So the player, let's say, whenever something happens, you need to check if the score increases. So we always start off a new block of code with an event. So again, when the green flag is pressed, signals that the game is starting. And maybe let's add some type of reward. Maybe this balloon. So like I think a couple people or someone's making a balloon game, right? So let's say that every time the player pops a balloon, they get a point. So when the green flag is pressed, we want to check forever. So we want to keep checking if the player is touching the balloon. So if the player is touching the balloon, then we want to increase the score. So this part of your code, this will mostly be done in another feature, right? So you can ignore step 3, keeping track of the score throughout the game, until you're working on the actual things that give you score, okay? So you don't need to add in this example. Just be mindful that whenever you do add the thing in that gives you score, like popping a balloon, destroying an enemy, defeating an enemy, or some of you are using just like time, survival time, all you need to do to increase your score is change your score, player score, by 1, or by whatever number you want to. This is the one block. That's all you need for step 3 to keep track of score. And then the same part is maybe if you have something to where the player can lose score, then you say if maybe there's a red balloon that they're not supposed to touch, and if they pop that, then their player score goes down by 1. So it changes by -1. And that'll make it go up and down. So right now our player can't move because that's not part of this feature. So we'll just put the balloon over there. We hit the green flag, and now we're getting a bunch of points because it's touching. Versus if we hit the green flag and they're not touching the balloon, we type in our name, and then boom. The score is 0. So all we need for step 3 is changing the player score by 1. The actual other pieces of our enemies, this will be another feature that we focus on, but it's not as important for the scoreboard. So we'll go ahead and move on to step 4. The game ends and the player sees their final score. So we need something to tell us when the game ends. So this isn't part of our feature, right? How does the game end? We don't know yet. Our feature is just the scoreboard. So our other feature that is responsible for the game ending, it needs to broadcast a message. So if we go over to events, we have this broadcast message. So something in our program somewhere is going to broadcast a message that says maybe game over, okay? And let's just put an event, so to test it, I'm going to put when the space key is pressed, we're going to broadcast game over. That way we can test our scoreboard. But this block is all you need somewhere else in your program in another feature, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the backdrop. This is what's responsible for checking our score. And the game ends and the player sees their final score. So we want some type of like ending screen here. So that's going to be a backdrop, and that's going to be part of the ending backdrop, right? So we're going to go to backdrops. We're going to create a new backdrop, and we'll make it a boardwalk, because why not? And this is going to be our end screen, okay? So this is going to be our end screen. So what we want to do in our code for these backdrops is we're going to say whenever I receive game over, we're going to switch the backdrop to the end scene, right? So backdrops, we're going to switch it to the end. And I'll just put end. So the picture is changing. That's part of looks. Pictures changing is part of looks. And so when I receive game over, we need to switch backdrop to the end. Now this is going to cause a small problem. Whenever we hit the green flag, we type in our name and we're good to go. But if you notice, we stayed on the end backdrop. So now that we have multiple backdrops, part of our setup is that we need to switch the backdrop back to the start. Okay, so part of our setup now is to switch the backdrop back to the start. I hit the green flag. Okay, now we're at the starting screen. I can type in my name, and now we can do that testing where I hit spacebar and it switches to the end screen. Okay, so the game ends and the player sees their final score. Okay, we switch to the screen and the score is going to be displayed here. So the score has been here the whole time, and we probably want to hide this stuff, right? So that's part of variables. We want to hide player name, and maybe we'll want to hide their score, maybe we don't, who knows. But whenever I receive game over, that's when we're going to show the player score for sure. So that way it pops up. And we can also show the player name. And this will show up their, this will let their score show up. So I'll go ahead and just hide it while they're playing. So that way we don't have a bunch of things there. Remember also, we want to make sure to stop this script at the end, no dangling puzzle pieces. And we're pretty good to go. Okay, so we're showing the player's score to them when the game ends. So I hit the green flag, I type in my name, all of that goes away. The start screen will probably want to switch to the whatever game level that you want to have. And now if I test it with the space bar, the end screen pops up. Okay, so we're pretty good to go. It says player name Kyle, and then it will show my score there. So far, boom, we've done step 4. Now for the last part, we need to display the player's score on the scoreboard. So this part is the tricky thing, and this is the most important part of this video. What we need is a list of player scores, okay? And this is something that we haven't talked about too much in class, which is how to make a list. So just follow along with this example, okay? So we need a list of player scores, and we want this list to be a part of the backdrops, and we're going to want another like a scoreboard, leaderboard. So I'll call it the leaders, and this is where we'll display all of the scores. So in our code for the backdrops, this is part of our backdrop stuff, we need to go to variables and we need to make a list. So that's down here right under my blocks, make a list. And the list is going to be the leaderboard or scoreboard. So you click OK. And now we have all of these other list options. Okay, and we have this leaderboard list pop up over here. So first, let's make sure that we hide this at the beginning. Okay, so the backdrop, whenever we click the green flag and all of this starts, we want the leaderboard to be hidden. All right, so maybe we do all of that first. So we switch the backdrop. And we hide the player name, we hide player score, and we hide the leaderboard, so that way the player doesn't see any of that. And then we ask them what's their name. Okay, so now if we click the green flag, all of that's hidden, and we're just typing in the prompt for the name, and then we're good to start. Okay, cool. So all of that's hidden. And whenever we receive game over, we want to do these things, switch backdrop to the end. And then we probably want to wait a little bit or have something to where after they have the game over screen, it switches to the leaderboard screen. So maybe we wait for let's wait for 5 seconds. And then we're going to switch the backdrop. So that's a looks. Switch backdrop to leaders. We're going to have our leaderboard backdrop. after we switch the backdrop to the leaders, we want to show the list again. So that's when we want to show the leaderboard. So we're show the list for the leaderboard. And we can test it. We hit the green flag. We type in our name. We hit the space bar. That's our game over condition right now. It switches to the end screen. Then it waits 5 seconds and switches to our leaderboard. And now this leaderboard shows up here. So now we need to add items to the leaderboard. So here it says we add a thing to the leaderboard. Well, that's exactly what we want to do. So we're going to add the player's name to the leaderboard and then add their score into it. And to do that, we need to do some math. So there's this leaderboard contains thing. There's this item number in the leaderboard, the length of the leaderboard, replace an item in the leaderboard. So we're going to have to check all of the items in the leaderboard to see where the player's score goes. But for this video, all we're going to do is add thing to the leaderboard, and that thing is going to be the player name. So all we're going to do is add the player name to the leaderboard. So if I type in Kyle, we start, the game is going, I hit spacebar to end the game, we have the game over screen, then after 5 seconds, we switch to the leaderboard, and now Kyle is on the leaderboard. If I were to stop and start again and type in a different name, like, not Joe Bob, what's your guys' favorite person? I know this. It's a radio, it's, who's the great rates guy? Jake's great rates. Jake from State Farm. There you guys go. That's who's playing. You hit the space bar, Jake from, you get the end screen. It says the player name is Jake from State Farm, and then it adds Jake from State Farm to the leaderboard. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here because this is a lot for this feature. The next thing we'll have to do, there'll be a part 2 of the leaderboard, and that'll be how do we add people's names and also their score to the leaderboard, and then how do we compare the current person's score with the scores in the leaderboard. Okay, so that's the hard part about this feature, is displaying those scores, and that's okay. We'll see it in video 2. Thank you for watching.